Uh, okay, now can we hear me? And we'll just get into a shape that feels very comfortable. Nice tall spine. Really been focused on how we can improve the quality of our seat and the stillness that improving that quality offers. So let's just really think about subtle tweaks, subtle adjustments, and more stillness. Every piece of the seat stack is important. I think the two areas of most common default are going to be lumbar extension and cervical spine flexion. So if the belly feels like it's going forward, see if you can engage the core. If the chin feels like it's tucking or you're feeling any pulling on the back of the neck, just that slight elevation to the chin. And we'll give ourselves just 30 more seconds here. And then thighs are closed, they can open and receive some light. Let's take our palms into a place where you can feel some stability. So whatever that means for you, but just the ability to anchor yourself with your hands. And then we'll turn over towards the right. Not necessarily using the hands as leverage here, just thinking about a stable anchor. And then we'll turn the head over towards the left. Anchoring with the hands, but not necessarily forcing rotation from them. And then we'll come back to neutral. Think about keeping the head as neutral as can be. Let's roll the palms so they can face up and then squeeze the shoulders up as high as you can without changing the head position. And then we'll let the chin tuck. Keep that shoulder squeeze. Maybe there's even just a little bit more shoulder squeeze available, and then we'll lift the chin. Same thing, keeping the shoulder squeeze. Maybe there's just a little bit more. Head back to neutral, shoulders drop back into that space. See if you can feel that whole shoulder shelf, that shoulder girdle relax. And see if you can do that without collapsing into that flexion of the lumbar. And then let's bring our hands together at heart center. Press the fingertips and finger mounds together. And then we're going to roll the elbow shoulder girdle with us as we turn towards the right. Hands staying at heart center as we rotate. And then we'll come back to neutral. And we'll do the same thing over to that second side. Hands staying at heart center as we rotate. Elbow shoulder girdle rolls with us. And then we'll come back to neutral and just take yourself into a little seated hold. This can be anything that feels beneficial here. Looking to play with a little bit of the space we crafted through that rotation. We'll give ourselves just 20 more seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, we'll walk ourselves up into seat and let's extend our legs out into staff. From staff, a nice generous knee bend. A offering enough generosity to yourself here that the hamstrings feel relatively free. And then let's take ourselves into a little more traditional seated forward fold. If you can grasp the toe mounds, you can use toe mound pressure forward to really pull on those big wide sheaths of musculature, both underneath subscapular and below towards that lumbar side of the scapula. And then we'll release ourselves back up into a seat. Let's bring the bottoms of the feet together. And here you can clasp the ankles, the toe mounds, the high shins, whatever feels appropriate, and just one last little seated forward fold. We're not spending a ton of time in any of these shapes, but we are just looking to warm up that forward fold chain of musculature. And that once we head onto our backs, that musculature can get easily forgotten about. Last 20 seconds here. Yeah, when it feels appropriate, we'll walk back up to seat. Nice work. All right. Well, I would say we've got our posterior chain fairly well warmed up. Let's have a ball just handy. And then we'll take our blanket or towel from a shelf fold to a hot dog fold. And we're going to run that across the body, across the mat, I guess. So against the length of the mat in the lumbar space. So we're looking to give a little extension as you lower yourself onto your back. Remembering, although I have the legs extended, the knees can be bent and the bottoms of the feet can also be together. Also remembering that we're all going to have some different torso geometry, some stickiness. So if the blanket isn't feeling advantageous for you, remove that or roll it or double fold it or make it less dense by elongating and then folding so that there's less material underneath you. Allow for the adjustments. And keep in mind, we went 3 different flexion shapes in a row. Yeah, 3 different flexion shapes in a row before we're here in this extension. So allow for the opportunity for your body to be taxed here. Allow is probably the wrong word. Acknowledge if your body feels taxed and resolve any discomfort. So I am remixing an old yogic story this week. And it starts with this coyote out in the Sonoran Desert. And it's a very old coyote, quite a lot of wisdom. It's also a very hungry coyote. And so it comes across this huge patch of prickly pear cactus. And although it's not its favorite food, it starts very selectively pulling the prickly pear cactus fruits off the flower spots. And it's a huge patch of cactus, and the paddles are offering some resistance, but a lot of work, a lot of determination. This coyote gets a huge amount of prickly pear cactus. Makes quite a mess of itself. It's eaten so many of them. And such a mess of itself that when it's done eating, it kind of looks at its paws, and they're now this like blend of pink and fuchsia dyed by the prickly pear cactus, all the way up past the shoulders. And so almost the front half of its torso has been dyed by these prickly pear cactus fruits. We're going to give ourselves 30 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, we'll bend the knees if they're not already and pull the prop out from underneath us. That prop comes out and the lumbar lowers. Opportunity to observe kind of the perception capacity of the body, right? I always feel like coming off of a lift, it's like the body is just sunk into a hole that's not truly beneath you. But note how both the upper and lower half of the spine are responding after that address of the lower half of the spine. And then we are going to pull our knees in towards our torso and grasp either the shins or the hamstrings, whatever feels appropriate. And then your choice here. You can keep your head and the thoracic spine firmly attached to the mat, or if you want to try to round and tuck, if that feels better for you, you're welcome to do that. The final goal is going to be to rock the body, the entirety of the body, so that you explore how pressure feels across the spine here, across the musculature supporting the spine. And then think about almost like you're rolling the weight in circles. So we're not just moving laterally, but like the weight is driving from your like right shoulder down into your left hip. And so you're anchoring in that left hip. And then as you roll back over towards the right, it's like the energy from the left shoulder rolls and drives down into that right hip. So that as you're moving, the sacrum and that whole sacral girdle is receiving pressure. And that pressure is responding against the neutrality of the mat. And then you're able to just really start to play with what needs to expand so that that deep subsacral musculature, which is so protected by this huge bony structure, can start to mobilize. So as you're moving, think about what you can do to shift the pelvic bowl and to shift the weight so that the entire both quadratus laborum musculature and then intertying subsacral musculature starts to space out and respond to your movement. And we'll give ourselves just about 20 more seconds to play with this. A long time in terms of how long we'd normally be in this shape. Usually it's like 15 seconds or so, but so many good things happening. And then eventually we come back to neutral. We release across that sacral region in particular. Knees can be bent. Actually, let's bend the knees because we're going to grab our ball and we're going to look to capture fascial lines, musculature that crosses over the sacrum and into the lumbar. So just above the bony structure of the sacrum here, we want to place that ball. Your whatever side you want to work on first is ideal. You have more feedback than I do on how your body was responding to the roll. But then once we get that, we're gonna like elevate into a very weak bridge. So just enough so that your body is kind of like able to roll on the top of the ball. And then we're just going to sway the hip side to side. And now we're only moving at the width of the ball, right? So wherever the ball can roll with us, we're moving that. And we're just trying to clear up all of the soft tissue just above that sacral bone. So we should be off the bone, but into the soft tissue. And that soft tissue can sometimes feel relatively bone-like because it is so rigid and so protected. But boy, this is a good spot to work. If we all did this every week, we'd be happier, better people. Ugh. Thinking about those spots of resistance, for most of us, it's going to be the quadratus laborum, that big QL strap of musculature, right kind of in the middle of that musculature sheath. And that is just, it's a piece of musculature that crosses over every vertebrae, right? You think about your vertebrae as joints. There is no other piece of musculature that interplays with that many joints. And so for most of us, it finds a way to get relatively cranky. And we'll give ourselves about 40 more seconds to play on this first side. Last 15 seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, we'll pull that ball out from side one. Let your knees fall over in that direction. So whichever side you were working on, the knees are falling in that direction for just a little static landing. And so almost immediately after this coyote realizes that it is essentially a neon pink color, it turns, and just up this little canyon wall, it sees a line of thousands of pack rats. And they're all going into this little cave. And the coyote looks at his paws and he thinks, there could not be a worse time for me to be neon pink. There's no way I'm going to sneak up on a pack rat. And boy, would that be a nice meal right now. When you're ready, knees back to neutral. We'll take our ball over to that second side. Again, just looking for soft tissue just above the sacrum. The hips are just slightly elevated so that you have freedom to sway. That obviously is always the wrong word. That also gives you the ability to control the pressure, right? Because if you want more pressure, you can take off the strength, more strength from the bridge, and let gravity just bring your body down more intently on that ball. So you have a lot of control here in how far you sway, in what areas of the soft tissue you play in. Try to find those areas that are most sensational and give them the opportunity to receive. And so the coyote just watches from behind this little prickly pear cactus stand as these rats run in. And it takes a long time for this procession of rats to make their way in. Over the course of the night, the rat keeps his eye on that pack rat cave and thinks about how he can use this opportunity to feed himself. And when the sun starts to rise in the next morning, the coyote perches himself right next to this pack rat cave. And he launches up on his back legs so his front paws are in the air. And he opens his mouth and he tilts his head just slightly towards the sky. Give ourselves just about 30 more seconds here on this second side. Any last little tweaks or adjustments? And then when it feels appropriate for you, we'll pull that ball out and let the knees fall in the same direction as you had the ball for the second side. really combining the freeing up of lumbar tissue with our rotation here. Last 15 seconds in this twist. And we'll bring the knees back to neutral. Let's re-engage our blanket. We'll take it from shelf fold and unfold that once, and then we're going to roll that. Yeah, roll works. Doesn't need to be rolled. Could just be a long hot dog. We're going to take the blanket on the ankles, tuck, and let the knees fall out wide, supported. Butterfly. Goal here is just to reset our trunk. So think about keeping your spine as neutral as possible. There is a desired kind of natural shifting of the body into extension here, but hopefully we've freed up a lot of space in the lumbar so that finding neutral is relatively easy. And let's just hold this neutral shape while we breathe for a moment. Letting your body be at ease. And so every morning before the rats rush out, they send out a little scout. He goes out and he steps, and like the first little rat paw hits the sun, and out of the corner of his eye, he sees this huge neon pink coyote, and he almost stops breathing. He like instantaneously freezes and then slowly backs in the cave, all the while having an eye on this brightly colored predator. He goes back in and he tells everyone, do not move. There is a coyote right outside the entrance waiting for us. And so they don't. And time starts to pass. And the sun's rising and rising and rising. And the sun goes all the way overhead at noon. The guard pops out again, and the coyote hasn't moved. It's still there, paws in the air, mouth open. Comes back and he tells everyone, and they start kind of discussing maybe it has died. Until the guard goes out a little further, and he's staring at the coyote, and it's still breathing. And he whispers back into the cave, it's still breathing. And there's like this reverberation of anticipation, excitement, dread that rips through the community. And they start encouraging him, like, go further, go see if it's maybe like in some catatonic state. And so the scout goes out and he pokes it, the coyote, right on the paw. And the coyote just slowly tilts his head down and says, hello, little one. And the rat is just trembling in fear. It looks back up at the coyote and it says, please don't hurt us. Let us leave. And the coyote, this big booming laugh, says, "Oh, you have nothing to fear from me. I'm here to protect you. I'm a divine messenger, you see. Look at my pink fur." And the rat says, "Yeah, your pink fur is interesting, but so are those sharp teeth." The coyote says, "Ah, you don't have to worry about my teeth. I'm an aeritarian. I keep my mouth open like this, and I eat nothing but air." And the rat kind of looks back skeptically. He says, "Why are you on your back paws? Why are you holding your front paws in the air?" The coyote says, "Well, like I said, I'm a divine messenger. And my weight is so profound that if I were to put all four paws on the earth at the same time, the earth would crumble beneath me. And so I sit like this to protect you." And so this scout goes back and he tells all the other rats what he's heard. And they are very hungry. And they weigh it and they vote on it and they decide, okay, let's go out. It sounds like we have a protector now. And they run out into the Sonoran Desert one by one, and rat after rat leaves the cave. And as they do, they look up and there's this coyote just sitting there on its back legs, two front paws in the air, mouth open, not moving, colored in this almost neon pink. Last about 40 seconds here. Just letting that sacral area completely reset, thinking about relaxing and resetting. Eventually, when it feels appropriate for you, we'll bring our knees back up to neutral. And we can take that blanket, you can keep it in the rolled space and just kind of set it to the side. We're going to head into what is my favorite static twist. We're doing it with a lot of trunk adaptation. So, right ankle is going to come across the left thigh. And then the bottom of the right foot comes down to the floor or mat. That right knee points roughly straight up. You do have the option here that you can use your prop to help guide this knee, or you could put it underneath the foot if it doesn't feel like getting all the way to the floor is right for the spine. The goal here is kind of twofold. One, we're in a very deep rotation of the lumbar spine. It's about as deep as I think you can find a twist. We're also putting a lot of pressure on the proximal head of the femur. By keeping this active and up, you can almost feel the head, that femoral head, pressing up against the internal musculature here. And so we're crafting some additional space for that proximal head of the femur while we get this deep, deep lumbar twist. The more external rotation pressure you get into the right knee, the more that femoral head gets its own adjustment. Breathe more space into this. I know this is a fairly intense twist, so I'm not going to put us here for too super long. But if we can get about 40 more seconds out of this, it'd be great. And when it feels appropriate, let's bring that right knee back across our body. We'll extend both legs down the mat and reach and extend both arms up and overhead, pointing the toes and the fingertips in opposite directions. Really trying to space out the entirety of the posterior and anterior musculature chains. And then we'll relax. Bring the knees back into a bent position. Take our left ankle across our right, and we'll take this to side two, dropping into that deep twist. With the twist, thinking about keeping that left knee pointed skyward so that the external rotation energy works on that proximal femoral head, and then just easing into this with your breath. By the time the rats come back in for the evening as the sun starts to set, they're feeling much more comfortable with this newfound guardian. Like they have this strongman protector that no other rat group may have. And so they kind of buzz in with excitement into the cave for the evening, one by one. And as the last rat is making its way into the cave, the coyote very quickly comes down on all fours, snatches the last rat in its mouth, and swallows it whole before anyone notices. And then it's back up, paws in the air, mouth open. And the next morning, when the rats rush out, the coyote waits till the very last rat is exiting, and very quickly, before anyone notices, drops down to all fours, snatches that last rat, and swallows it whole before anyone notices, and it's back on its back paws, mouth open. Last 30 seconds here on this second side. When it feels appropriate, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. Make sure your hips are in line. Extend your legs down the mat. Extend your arms overhead. Reach into both directions. . And then we'll relax. Last propped thing we're going to do, we're going to take our blanket from a shelf fold-ish. Doesn't need to be. We're going to end up with a neck roll. So I've created a nice mess with my blankets. Neck roll so that we can put this underneath the cervical spine, have enough roll that we feel pressure so that there is an extension energy into the cervical spine. You can also do this with your ball, and shame on me for not offering this first, because this is my new favorite thing, is you take your blanket from shelf fold, place the ball in the middle, put that in a hot dog fold, and then you have that ball as your pressure point, and that holds the ball and allows you to get a much more precise articulation of the cervical spine. And the blanket here is literally just there so that the ball won't roll away. So you can change the density of this blanket in any way that suits you if you choose to go that path. This is another one of those shapes that if we did every day would dramatically change our lives. There are several different kind of points that you can, there are 3 different points that you can attack here, go after here. You can go at the base of the cervical spine where we tend to develop that cell phone bump. You can go in the middle of the cervical spine where you'll get the deepest amount of total articulation, or you can go at the base of the skull where you can put some nice pressure at that brainstem and help address that blood-brain barrier flow. Any of those points that feel the best, the most ideal for you, let's settle in there. And so from that point on, day after day, when the rats come home, the very last rat quickly snatched into this coyote's mouth. And when the rats leave in the morning, the very last rat quickly snatched into the coyote's mouth. And day after day, the bond between this coyote and these rats strengthens. They feel more and more protected by this rat, by this coyote covered in pink cactus makeup, with its paws in the air and its mouth open. One summer evening, right around the solstice, that scout rat that had the first encounter with the coyote comes up to the king of this pack rat community. Your Highness, I've been doing some reconnaissance and looking around. Our numbers seem to be dwindling. And the king kind of looks up and he looks around, and definitely something seems to be off. there seem to be less pack rats in their den. And he says, "Come with me." And they go outside and they just kind of peek around the corner of this cave entrance. And there's that pink coyote. And the scout says, "Put the belly on this guy. It's quite a belly for someone who just eats air, isn't it?" The king says, "Mm." And they go back inside. We'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here. If you want, you can start to move the head too so that you get into the lateral edges of that levitator musculature supporting the cervical spine, allowing for our head lifts. And then eventually there's going to come a time when we'll remove that prop from underneath us, allow our body to come back to its neutrality against the mat, and ask ourselves if there's anything we need prior to Shavasana. Ooh, and if not, let's just settle into a shape where we can fully and deeply appreciate some stillness. And so the next morning, when the pack heads out, the king stays in the back of the cave and he watches as each member of his community runs and exits. And so, waiting in the back of the cave as what will be the last pack rat leaves. The king pack rat watches the coyote come down on all fours, snatch a rat, and bounce back up into its position. Paws in the air, mouth open. And we'll start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes. Our wrists and our ankles. Elbows and knees. Shoulders and hips. Neck and head, jaw, eyes, tongue, spine. Yeah, the entirety of the body moves. And we'll utilize that movement to transition from the shapes we are in and find our way back into a seat. In the seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. And with your next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 5 months, can you remind yourself that there are people willing to get fat off words and promises that aren't necessarily tied to reality, and become the rat in the back of the cave so that you have the best perspective. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you. I'll be back tomorrow night so we can move. Hope you have a beautiful rest of your Sunday. Love the heck out of you for being here. See you soon. Mwah.